He woke on black ash with no clothes and an enemy anthem in his ears, and the woman who tried to kill him smiled like she had planned it. Elias Hale had never meant to sleep where history died. The cargo run to Sector 9 had ended with an ambush, half the convoys gone up in glass and fire, and him ejected like a coin from a machine. When he opened his eyes, the world smelled of sulfur and old metal, the sky a bruise of orange smoke. He was naked, numb, and very much alive, which worried him more than the lack of clothing. Something moved at the edge of his vision, a figure stepping through smoke like a blade cutting shadow. Armor plates glinted with cruel geometry. Silver hair fell in a tangled braid. The woman wore the insignia Elias had seen on the enemy patrols, the Ameri crest, a ringed star with a slash through it. Her eyes were violet, hard as cut glass, and she watched him as if she were cataloging a curiosity. "Finally," she said, voice like a metal bell. "Thought you'd burned." He rolled to his side, every muscle protesting. Instinct did two things at once. He reached for a weapon that wasn't there, and he measured distance, the one sensible currency in hostile ruins. No gun. No pack. Whoever had done this hadn't wanted him taking anything with him. "You should finish it," she continued, stepping closer so the tags on her chest plate reflected his face. Soldiers do not survive long naked and alone. Instead of answering, Elias focused on the small, human thing that refused to die inside him, empathy in the middle of chaos. He pushed himself up on one elbow. "Save me the sermon," he rasped. "Help me stand." That phrase registered not as weakness, but as a test. For a heartbeat, the woman's expression didn't change. Then something like recognition softened the hard line of her mouth. "Why?" she asked. "Because you asked," he said simply, surprising himself with how calm it sounded. "And because no one told me mercy was out of style." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a short bark of disbelief. It did not fit her face. "Hale," she said, pronouncing his name like it belonged to a story she thought she remembered. "You are Elias Hale. Captain Hale. I read the reports. You burned their supply lines in Calum Ridge." "Seems my resume follows me," he muttered, then added a question more honest than tactical. "Who are you?" "Imeri." He could see the curved sigils tattooed at the edge of her jaw. "Sarai Vel," she replied. The name landed like a blade. "I am not your executioner today." Hands worked with awkward courtesy, searching felled timber and splintered beam for something with a strap, an edge, a point. The woman glanced at a ruined crate and tore a strip of fabric, holding it out. Elias took it. When she ripped another piece and bound his bleeding shoulder without ceremony, his respect did the quiet math. She could have killed him at the first breath and chosen not to. "You should leave," Sarai said after she finished, the words in order softened. "Patrols still sweep the south quarter. They will find this place before midnight." "And leave you here?" Elias answered. He tried to sit. Pain laced his side, but the world steadied. The woman had not only dressed his wound, but handed him purpose. "No." Sarai's jaw tightened. "If they see you with me, they will call me traitor. My unit does not forgive." "Neither do mine," Elias said. He paused, looking at her face, the trickle of a scar at her temple. "Then we have something in common." There was a dangerous kind of honesty in his tone. It was not bravado. It was the only currency two soldiers had left, truth. She watched him as if weighing the taste of a hazard, danger or salvation. Fire popped somewhere deep in the ruins, a reminder the city was not yet done with killing. Sarai shouldered a bent blade and extended her free hand. "Move," she ordered. Elias took it. Her grip was iron and honest. As he pulled himself up, the ruined skyline framed them. Statues toppled, banners charred, and in the distance a flare of searchlight. A human freed from armor and an Imeri warrior bound by oath, stepping off together, both carrying the same quiet, dangerous thing, a choice. At the edge of the square, a scavenger drone whirred, its optics focusing on them. Its antennae blinked. The sound could be nothing, or it could call the patrols. Sarai glanced at Elias, eyes narrowing but not in hatred. She had made one small gamble by saving him. Now the city demanded its price. She mouthed a word Elias couldn't hear. He didn't need to. Her hand tightened on his sleeve, and all at once they sprinted, boots slapping ash, toward a half-collapsed arcade that promised shadow and cover. Behind them, the drone shifted its angle, and for the first time since he woke, Elias felt something other than raw fear, a shred of belonging. The ruins swallowed sound like a tomb. Only their breaths broke the silence, ragged, fast, human. Elias ducked beneath a fractured archway, stone dust scraping his throat. Behind him, Sarai moved like a phantom, precise, disciplined, deadly quiet. When the echo of the drone faded, she pressed her back against the wall and looked at him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "You run too loud," she whispered. "I bleed too loud," Elias answered, pulling his hand from his side. The makeshift bandage was dark with fresh blood. Sarai's jaw flexed. "You shouldn't be alive." He smiled weakly. "That makes two of us." For a moment, neither moved. Smoke drifted through the cracks above them, turning the light a dirty amber. Elias could hear the hum of power lines somewhere in the distance, still alive, still feeding what was left of the city's broken machines. He leaned against the wall, breath short. Sarai knelt without asking and tore open his bandage again. "I told you not to move. You also told me to run. That was before I saw how useless you are at it." The line was dry, sharp, and almost human. Elias caught a flicker in her expression, a trace of humor so small it vanished before it could live. "You've got jokes," he said quietly. She didn't answer. Her hands worked fast, binding his wound again with deliberate precision. When she finished, she wiped her fingers on her armor and finally looked at him. "You fight differently from the others. How many humans have you fought?" "Enough to know most die fast." He nodded once. "Guess I'm bad at following trends." Her stare lingered a little too long. Something unreadable moved in her eyes, not warmth but curiosity. Elias noticed the fine scars running across her knuckles, the way her armor had been patched with pieces from different units. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a survivor who'd stopped believing in victory a long time ago. Outside, a metallic growl rolled through the streets, the sound of a patrol carrier moving closer. Sarai froze, head tilting, listening. "They're sweeping the sector. 6, maybe 8 units. You can tell that just from the sound?" "I can tell because I used to lead them." Elias met her gaze. The realization hit like a punch. "You're not just Imeri, you're command." She didn't deny it. Was. He wanted to ask what was meant, but her eyes had gone distant, watching something he couldn't see. "Regret, maybe. Or memory." "They'll find this block soon," she said. "We move through the underworks. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads out of the city." "Perfect," Elias said. "Lead the way." She hesitated. "If you follow me, you won't stop running." "Not tonight, not tomorrow. They'll hunt us both." Elias straightened despite the pain. "They were already hunting me. Difference is now I've got company." For the first time since he met her, Sarai didn't have an answer ready. She just looked at him, the soldier who should have been her enemy, and nodded once. They moved fast through the broken hallways, descending into the dark. Pipes dripped overhead, steam hissing through ruptured vents. The tunnels smelled of oil and rust and old blood. The hum of machinery above them faded until there was only the rhythm of their footsteps. 2 soldiers breathing the same air, hearts out of sync, but somehow keeping time. Halfway down the corridor, Sarai stopped abruptly. Her hand shot out, catching his arm. "Quiet!" Elias froze. Ahead, faint light flickered around a bend. Shadows moved, 3 figures armed, scanning the tunnel with pulse rifles. Sarai mouthed the single word, "Scouts." He glanced at her. "You know them?" She nodded once. "My unit." Elias understood instantly. If they saw her with him, it was over. He touched her wrist lightly. "We can take them." "No," she whispered. "If they die, more will come. We hide." Without hesitation, she grabbed his shoulder and pulled him into a side alcove, tight, narrow, their bodies almost touching. The air was thick with dust and tension. He could feel the tremor in her breath, hear the steady beat of her heart through the armor. The scouts passed slowly, their boots echoing against metal. One stopped inches from the alcove, turning his light toward the darkness. Elias didn't breathe. Sarai's hand pressed against his chest, holding him still. The beam lingered, then moved on. The moment they were gone, she dropped her hand and stepped back fast, eyes unreadable. "Don't speak," she said, voice low. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you trust me." Elias gave a faint, tired smile. "Too late." She turned away before he could see her face. "Then you're a fool." "Maybe," he said softly. "But so are you." The faintest tremor passed through her shoulders. He couldn't tell if it was anger or laughter. Then she started walking again, deeper into the dark. At the far end of the tunnel, an old service door loomed half buried in debris. Sarai forced it open with a grunt, metal shrieking. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and distant fire. She looked back once at Elias, her expression softer than before. "If you keep following me," she said quietly, "you'll stop being a soldier long before you stop being hunted." He met her gaze. "Then I guess I'll have to learn fast." For the first time, she didn't argue. They stepped into the rain together. Rain hammered the ruined city as Elias and Sarai stumbled into a half-collapsed warehouse at the edge of the industrial district. The roof sagged under years of neglect, letting rivulets of water trickle down onto puddles of mud and broken machinery. Shadows stretched across the walls, flickering in the intermittent lightning outside. Sarai dropped to the floor first, her body still stiff and sore. Elias followed, carefully checking the entrance before letting himself slump against a support beam. He pulled a small, waterproof pack from his shoulder, scanning the room. Empty crates, shattered conveyor belts, and stacks of metal drums were all that remained. It wasn't much, but it was safe for now. "Sit," Elias said, patting the ground beside him. "Try to keep your wounds from reopening." She hesitated, eyes narrowing, but obeyed. "You've got an unusual amount of patience for a human." "Training," he replied, voice dry but calm. "And stubbornness. I don't leave people behind." Sarai's gaze softened ever so slightly, and for a moment, the alien warrior looked like someone else entirely. A girl trained to survive, now questioning the lines she had been taught to live by. "You could leave," she muttered. "I could," Elias admitted. "But I won't. Not while you're breathing." Silence fell, heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, rain pounded the tin roof, washing the streets clean of dust and blood, and distant fires flickered like dying stars. Inside, the only movement was the slow drip of water and the quiet settling of two lives caught between war and trust. Sarai finally let herself look at him fully, noting the small cuts along his forearm, the weariness etched into his face. "Why do you do it?" she asked quietly. "Why risk your life for someone who should be your enemy?" Elias's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "Because nobody deserves to die alone. Not even an enemy." The words struck her harder than any blade ever could. She had fought countless humans, killed without hesitation, yet this one spoke as if compassion was a weapon stronger than steel. She tried to turn away, but the firelight from a small flare of wood he had gathered caught her face, revealing the faint scars along her cheek and the shimmer of her violet eyes. "You make it complicated," she said. "Good," he said simply, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Life shouldn't be simple." Sarai turned her gaze to the floor, her hands trembling slightly. She could feel the pulse in her chest, racing, not from fear, but from something she didn't yet understand. The alien warrior who had always measured worth in strength and victory found herself weighing something entirely new: trust, mercy, and a human word she had never heard before. Beautiful. She remembered his whisper, soft and certain, carrying no mockery or deceit. The word had been dangerous, unfamiliar, yet it had rooted in her thoughts like fire in the cold. She could not deny it. Elias noticed her silence and leaned back against the wall, watching the storm through a jagged hole in the roof. "We'll rest here a little," he said. "Then we move before the patrols find us." Sarai nodded slowly, her pride warring with the strange comfort she felt beside him. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a weapon in the hands of her people. She felt like herself. Vulnerable, yes, but alive in a way she had forgotten existed. Hours passed in quiet vigilance. Elias hummed softly under his breath, a tune unfamiliar to Sarai, but oddly soothing. She watched him, noting how careful he was even with the smallest movements, how his hands never lingered unnecessarily on her armor or her wounds. Every action was deliberate, protective, yet unintrusive. When the rain finally eased, Sarai broke the silence. "Tell me," she said, voice low. "Why did you stay? Why care?" Elias's gaze met hers again, calm, certain. "Because you matter. Because life matters. Because someone has to make a choice when the world doesn't." The storm outside had passed, leaving the city drenched and silent. Sarai pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the weight of his words settle there. She no longer understood the rules her people had drilled into her. Strength, victory, survival, none of it mattered now in the same way. Outside, distant engines hummed, signaling patrols moving on. Inside, two enemies of the universe sat close enough to feel each other's breath, caught between war and an unfamiliar truce. One forged not in alliance, but in choice. For the first time, Sarai felt she could breathe without armor, and the human beside her had given her that freedom, not by orders, not by strategy, but by something she would never have expected: trust. The warehouse floor vibrated with a faint tremor as Sarai and Elias rose from their meager shelter. Rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the night remained thick with shadow, each alleyway and broken building a potential trap. "They followed us," Elias whispered, his rifle already in hand. His eyes scanned the debris-choked streets beyond the warehouse, moving like trained predators. Sarai's violet eyes narrowed. Her hand brushed the edge of her blade, the muscles in her arms tense. I should be faster. I should have caught them before. Elias's hand on her shoulder stopped her. You're not alone. Not tonight. For a fraction of a second, her pride warred with the instinct to refuse aid. Then she let him guide her forward, their steps silent on the wet stones. The faint hum of engines grew louder, echoing between collapsed towers like distant thunder. Through a narrow gap in the ruins, figures emerged, 2 Kathari scouts, their weapons glowing faintly in the dim light. They moved cautiously, aware that the ruins were alive with movement. Elias gestured for Sarai to stay low, then crouched beside her. You take the left flank. I'll cover the right, he said quietly. We don't want to be seen yet. Sarai's hands tightened on her weapon. For the first time in days, she felt the familiar thrill of combat pulse through her veins, but it was tempered by the strange warmth she felt near Elias, the trust forming between them. As the scouts rounded the corner, Elias fired first, a silent, precise shot that dropped one scout without alerting the other. Sarai reacted instinctively, leaping from her cover and striking the second scout with a swift, lethal sweep of her blade. Her movements were sharp, precise, deadly, yet this time, she wasn't fighting just for survival or honor. She was fighting to protect the human who had shown her mercy. Breathing heavily, they regrouped behind a collapsed wall. Sarai's chest heaved as she leaned against the rubble, sweat mixing with the rain. Elias crouched beside her, checking her armor and wounds. You okay? He asked, voice calm, steady, but laced with concern. Sarai hesitated, searching his eyes. For the first time, she felt her defenses crumble, not because of fear, but because of something more dangerous, care. I am, she said finally, her voice low. Another rumble echoed through the streets. More patrols were converging, drawn by the faint glow of the earlier skirmish. Elias motioned her to follow. We move fast. Stick close, and don't show hesitation. They sprinted through the ruined streets, weaving between broken buildings and piles of debris. Sarai's agility complemented Elias's precise tactical movements. They moved as if they had fought together for years, though their bond was only days old. A narrow alley offered a temporary refuge. Elias pressed himself against the wall, signaling her to do the same. We can't stay long, he whispered. They'll call reinforcements. Sarai's eyes glowed faintly in the shadows, and she felt the pulse of her alien instincts sharpen. But she also felt Elias's steady presence beside her, his trust in her, his quiet certainty that they could survive together. We can make it, she said, more to herself than to him. Together, Elias added, and his hand brushed briefly against hers as they moved. That simple contact was enough to remind her that the world had shifted, not just outside in the war-torn city, but inside her. The patrols rounded the corner, weapons raised, and Elias reacted instantly, covering her as she leapt from her hiding spot, striking with lethal precision. The battle was brief, violent, and sharp. The patrols fell, and the city seemed to sigh in silence once more. Sarai stood beside him, blade dripping, chest heaving. She met his gaze, and for the first time in her life, did not feel shame for needing help. She had fought beside a human and survived, and not just survived, thrived. Elias lowered his rifle, looking at her with that same calm, unshakable certainty. Not bad, he said lightly, a faint smile on his lips. Sarai's lips twitched at the corner, a smile almost breaking through her battle-hardened expression. Not bad, she echoed, disbelief coloring her tone. Not bad at all, he repeated, eyes scanning the street, ever vigilant. The rain slowed to a drizzle, washing the streets clean again. For the first time, Sarai realized that the war around them didn't define her. Her choices did. And the human beside her had shown her that there was strength in mercy, trust, and connection. The faint glow of dawn barely pierced the smoke-choked streets. Elias and Sarai crouched behind a crumbled wall, breathing shallowly, listening. The city had grown eerily silent after their last skirmish, but the stillness was deceptive. A deep mechanical rumble rolled through the ruins, different from the patrols before. This was larger, heavier, a force designed to dominate and destroy. From the horizon, massive Kathari walkers emerged, their armored legs crunching over debris, searchlights cutting through the morning haze. Sarai's violet eyes narrowed, and her hand instinctively gripped her blade. She felt the old fear, the rush of battle, but also something new, hesitation. Not for herself, but for the human at her side. Elias moved beside her, scanning the advancing machines with calm precision. They're heavy walkers, Elias whispered, voice low but steady. Not just scouts. They'll crush anything in their path if we're caught out in the open. Sarai clenched her jaw. We can't outrun them. We don't have to, he replied. We'll make them hesitate long enough to find cover. Stick close. They slipped through side streets, ducking beneath fallen archways and through collapsed buildings. Sarai's agility and combat instincts were unmatched, yet Elias's strategy guided them. A human who fought not just with strength but with foresight. A massive walker turned a corner ahead, searchlights sweeping the area. Sarai froze, instinct telling her to strike, to move. Her people had trained her to face overwhelming odds without question. But Elias pressed a hand lightly to her back, grounding her. Wait for my mark, he said. We move together, or not at all. Her pulse raced as the walker's lights passed mere meters from them. She could feel the heat radiating from its armored hull, the vibrations through the cracked streets. The tension was unbearable, but Elias's presence was a counterweight, steadying, grounding. Then, the first walker's cannon roared, sending a column of stone and rubble into the air. Sarai instinctively dove, blade extended, but Elias caught her arm mid-leap. Together, he reminded her. They moved as one, weaving through debris, ducking behind walls, and striking with precise, calculated blows when smaller patrol units tried to flank them. Every time Sarai faltered, Elias was there, not overbearing, not protective in a way that diminished her, but supportive, synchronizing with her every move. At a narrow intersection, they reached a collapsed plaza. The walker's massive legs blocked their retreat. Sarai's heart sank. Elias's eyes scanned the scene, calculating. Then he whispered, We'll draw them toward the old power conduit. Sarai blinked, comprehension dawning. Elias was planning a trap, leveraging the ruins, using the environment to level the odds. Are you insane? She hissed, a mixture of awe and disbelief. Maybe, he replied calmly. But it's our best shot. With synchronized precision, they lured the nearest walker toward the exposed conduit. Sarai struck first, landing a disabling blow on a patrol unit that tried to intercept them. Elias manipulated the environment, using his knowledge of explosives and debris to destabilize the conduit. A blinding explosion tore through the plaza, shaking the ground, sending sparks and smoke into the sky. The walker stumbled, its systems damaged, buying them precious seconds. Sarai's pulse raced, not from fear alone, but from exhilaration and the strange bond forming with Elias. As dust settled, Elias extended a hand. We move now. No hesitation. Sarai grabbed it without a word, letting him guide her through the chaos. Behind them, the walkers were struggling to regain footing, and the patrol units were scattered and disoriented. They reached the outskirts of the ruined city, just as the first rays of sunlight cut through the smoky haze. Sarai paused, chest heaving, watching Elias move ahead, ever vigilant. For the first time, she realized the magnitude of her choices. She had fought beside a human, survived overwhelming odds, and discovered trust, and perhaps something more, in the midst of war. Her blade hung at her side, no longer just a tool of survival or conquest. It was part of her, yes, but so was this strange, growing respect and reliance on the human, who had changed everything she thought she knew about strength, mercy, and courage. Night had fallen completely. The outskirts of the ruined city were quiet, but Sarai's mind was anything but. She walked slightly behind Elias, each step measured, aware of the faint sounds of distant patrols, but also of her own racing thoughts. Her body was healing, but her heart felt raw, exposed. She glanced at Elias. His movements were calm, methodical, always scanning, always protective. He had offered no unnecessary words, no unneeded comfort. Yet every glance, every small gesture, communicated something she could not ignore. Respect. Consideration. Something that went beyond survival. I shouldn't, she started, voice tight, cutting through the silence. Elias didn't turn, only slowed his pace slightly, waiting. You shouldn't what? His tone was even but gentle. Feel this, she admitted, a rare crack in her usual armor of pride and discipline. I shouldn't feel grateful. I shouldn't rely on a human. My people, they'll call me a traitor if they knew. Elias finally turned, his violet-gray eyes catching hers in the dim moonlight. And yet you do. Sarai looked away, jaw tight. It's weakness. That's what it is. Or, he said quietly, it's understanding. Seeing someone as more than an enemy. Recognizing value where others see only threat. She swallowed hard. The words struck deep. Her entire life had been a series of drills, battles, tests. Strength was survival. Weakness was death. And here was this human, showing her something that felt forbidden: empathy, patience, consideration. The wind rustled through the broken trees, carrying a faint metallic tang, battle remnants, even at this distance. Sarai's violet eyes reflected the faint moonlight. "You make it difficult," she whispered, not entirely aware of the confession. "I'm not trying to," Elias replied, eyes calm, steady. "I'm just being who I am. And I'm here. You can choose to accept it, or not." Her pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed caution, yet something deeper, a curiosity, a fragile trust, pushed her forward. "Why do you care so much?" Elias studied her for a long moment, silence stretching between them like a living thing. Then he said simply, "Because your life matters. Not to anyone else out here, maybe, but to me. That's reason enough." Sarai's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her this way. No commander, no mentor, no enemy. A storm of emotions surged: confusion, fear, fascination. And beneath it all, a dangerous spark of hope. She wanted to argue. She wanted to push him away, to remind herself that humans were weak, that trust was a liability, that feelings were a vulnerability. But her body and mind refused. She could not deny the effect of his words, his presence, his quiet strength. For the first time, she understood that survival wasn't just about wielding a blade or commanding fear. Survival could also mean choosing who to trust, who to stand beside, even when it went against every lesson drilled into her. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted finally, voice low, almost a whisper. "Do what?" Elias asked, tilting his head, genuinely curious. "Stand with you. Believe in you. Believe in us." His gaze softened. "Then start small. One step at a time. I'll be here. Not to force you. Not to push you. Just here." Sarai took a slow breath, letting his words sink in. The night pressed in around them, shadows long and shifting, danger still out there, but for the first time, she felt a fragment of clarity. Maybe strength wasn't only measured in skill or victory. Maybe it could also be measured in trust, in connection, in choosing someone even when the world told you not to. She glanced at him again. Elias waited patiently, without judgment, without expectation. Her hand twitched slightly, almost reaching for his, but she restrained herself. She wasn't ready, not yet. But the acknowledgement of possibility, that small spark, was enough to change her trajectory. The distant hum of Kathari patrols reminded them of the ongoing war. Survival still mattered. Every decision carried risk. Yet in that quiet moment, amidst ruins and shadows, Sarai realized something crucial. She no longer faced the future alone. And that realization, dangerous and frightening as it was, made her stronger than she had ever been. Dawn broke over the ruined city in a pale wash of gray and gold. Dust hung in the air, refracting the weak sunlight like scattered sparks. Sarai and Elias moved cautiously along the fractured streets, silent except for the crunch of rubble beneath their boots. The city, though quiet now, was a trap waiting to snap shut. From above, the faint whir of drones betrayed the approach of Kathari elite forces, lethal hunters sent to track survivors. Their search patterns were precise, systematic. Sarai's pulse quickened. Every step she took carried the weight of choice: fight, flee, or be captured. Elias motioned for her to crouch behind a collapsed wall. "They're close," he whispered. His voice was steady, but his eyes scanned every shadow, every corner. Sarai's hand gripped her blade tighter. For the first time since her capture, she didn't just feel fear, she felt responsibility. Not just for herself, but for Elias, who had chosen to stand beside her when the world said he shouldn't. The first patrol squad rounded a corner. 3 Kathari warriors, clad in dark armor, their weapons humming with deadly energy. They hadn't spotted them yet. Sarai's instinct screamed attack, but Elias held up a hand. "Wait," he murmured. "We control the fight, not them." Sarai's brow furrowed. "Trust him." She repeated the words silently. She had no choice. Not entirely. As the warriors drew closer, Elias fired a single precise shot. One soldier went down before the others even knew they were targeted. Sarai's eyes widened, not at the kill, but at the timing, the restraint, the method. Elias wasn't reckless. He didn't just fight, he dictated the battle. The remaining 2 pressed forward, realizing the ambush. Sarai leapt from cover, blade flashing, her movements fluid despite her lingering weakness. Each strike was calculated, each parry purposeful. Elias moved beside her, rifle steady, his presence a constant shield. One enemy soldier lunged at Sarai from behind. She faltered, exhaustion threatening her balance, but Elias was there in a heartbeat, knocking the attacker back with precise fire. Her chest heaved. She had trained her entire life to fight alone, to rely on nothing but herself. Now relying on him felt strange, but it also felt right. The fight escalated, a blur of motion and sound. Sparks from energy blades cut through the dust. Shouts in alien tongues echoed off broken walls. Sarai moved as if the battle was choreography, each action in rhythm with Elias's silent commands. They weren't just fighting side by side, they were anticipating each other, a silent understanding forming in the chaos. Finally, the last enemy fell. Sarai's blade hummed faintly as it struck, and she staggered, exhaustion hitting her in waves. Elias caught her arm before she could collapse. She met his eyes, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. "You okay?" he asked, voice calm, but carrying a weight of concern that cut deeper than any weapon. Sarai inhaled, trying to steady herself. "Ah, yes. Thanks to you." "Don't thank me," he said quietly. "We survived together, or not at all." She nodded, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. It wasn't just relief. It was recognition. The human at her side wasn't just an ally. He was a choice she was willing to make, against everything her people had drilled into her. The ruins were silent again, save for their ragged breaths. Sarai's violet eyes swept over the fallen soldiers, her mind conflicted. Mercy, restraint, connection, concepts her people despised, had carried them through. And for the first time, she considered that maybe strength wasn't only about winning battles. Maybe it was about protecting someone else, even at risk to yourself. Elias lowered his rifle, watching her carefully. "We can move now. Rest a little before the next patrol." Sarai nodded, allowing herself to lean against him for balance, a small, forbidden gesture of trust. The bond between them had shifted, no longer just survival, no longer just wary alliance. A deeper understanding had formed, tested in fire, solidified in choice. The city stretched before them, broken but still navigable. Shadows lingered in every corner. Danger wasn't over. The war wouldn't end tomorrow. But for Sarai, something inside had changed irreversibly. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a fighter with a choice, and she had chosen to stand with him. Night had fully fallen over the ruined city. A ghostly silver moon filtered through the clouds, casting fractured light across crumbled towers and jagged streets. Sarai and Elias moved cautiously, their shadows stretching long and distorted against broken walls. Every sense was alert. The Kathari patrols were still out there, relentless in their hunt. Ahead, a collapsed plaza opened into a large courtyard, littered with debris and the skeletal remains of war machines. It was a perfect trap. From the shadows, the elite Kathari commander emerged, Sarai's own superior, the one who had marked her as a loyal soldier, now standing in judgment. Behind him, dozens of warriors advanced, weapons drawn, scanning every corner. Sarai froze, her body stiff. The choice she had avoided for days now confronted her with brutal clarity. Fight alongside the human and face death, or obey her people, betray him, and live with a conscience forever fractured. Elias crouched beside her, eyes calm but sharp. "Whatever happens, we do it together," he whispered. His voice didn't carry orders, it carried faith, a faith that unsettled her more than any threat. Her superior's voice rang out, commanding and cold. "Sarai of the Blades, step forward and surrender. The human is a traitor. Kill him, or be executed yourself." The words struck her like lightning. Her people had taught her that strength meant obedience, loyalty meant survival. But the human beside her, he had shown her something impossible, something forbidden. Compassion, restraint, and belief in her as more than a weapon. Sarai's violet eyes flicked to Elias. No words were needed. They had survived together, bled together, and silently carried each other through peril. That bond, born of shared danger and quiet humanity, had forged a new truth inside her. A heartbeat passed, then another. The commander barked again, signaling his warriors to attack. Steel hummed, energy weapons flared. Instinct surged. Sarai leapt forward, side by side with Elias, her blade flashing in perfect coordination with his rifle fire. Each strike, each shot was a declaration. She would no longer be defined by her people's expectations. The battle was brutal but swift. Elite warriors fell one by one. Sarai's strength wavered, exhaustion threatening to break her, but Elias steadied her every time. She no longer fought just for survival. She fought for choice, for freedom, for the strange warmth of trust and connection she had never known. Finally, her superior fell to the ground, defeated but alive. He looked at her with disbelief, rage twisting his features. You betrayed us? Sarai stood over him, chest heaving, eyes ablaze. I chose what I believe, she said, voice steady and unwavering. I choose to fight for what matters, not blind loyalty. You have your warriors, your rules, but I am not yours anymore. Elias lowered his rifle, stepping beside her. And I choose you, he added simply. No need for ceremony, no grand declarations, just truth. The commander and surviving warriors hesitated, uncertain, shaken by the unexpected defiance. Sarai's words and actions had fractured the unquestionable hierarchy of fear and obedience they had relied on. They slowly withdrew, leaving the pair standing amidst the ruins. Sarai let herself breathe for the first time in days, the weight of her past and the expectations of her people lifting slightly. Her body was bruised, her muscles ached, but her mind was clear. She had made a choice, one that no one could take away. Elias glanced at her, his eyes soft yet intense. You're okay? Sarai allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. I am now, she admitted. The ruins stretched endlessly before them, a scarred and dangerous world, yet for the first time, it felt like theirs to walk together. She realized that strength was not only in victory or survival, it was in choosing what to fight for and whom to stand beside. The night whispered around them, shadows shifting, dangers lurking, but Sarai no longer feared them alone. With Elias at her side, she had stepped beyond obedience, beyond fear, and into the freedom of choice.